Hi, folks. I think what I would start out with a couple of things. One, I want this to be as useful to you as possible. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. I will do my very best to answer anything that you ask. Come on in. I think I need to tell you that I will try to disclose. Again, there's no hidden agenda here. As a matter of fact, along that line, just a little bit about me. I took the job at North Bennington when it was a public school. I came out of retirement. This was a retirement job for me. And I had promised at the time that I would work with them about 5 years, and that was 5 years ago. Actually, 10 years. I've been there 10 years now. And again, because it was a retirement job for me, I didn't come into this with some agenda. I wasn't looking to do anything other than, during the interview process, one of the issues that, was very thematic from parents and the staff and the board was the concern about their school. And, they were very worried that looking at the demographics of the state of Vermont and also how it was interacting with, Act 68, the financial structure, the school may not be able to survive. And what they said to me is, we want you to fix that. We want you to somehow ensure that in a financially, appropriate way, the school can be all the things it should be for the community, but most importantly, that will stay. It'll be here. And I think the reason for that was, I don't know how much you know about North Bennington, but it's a very small village, about 1.4 square miles. All of the kids walk to school. The village has a long-standing history outside of the school of seeing itself as being pretty self-contained. And I think the folks that were connected to this understood that if the school disappeared, the village itself would eventually go away. Because what else would attract people to live there, particularly young families, in a village that's geographically contained, so there's not a lot of opportunity for a lot of new housing and so on. So as there's that turnover, what's going to attract young families into the village, and what's going to keep them? I'm also going to tell you right up front, this is not a panacea. Just so that you understand that, that what we did is not going to solve all the issues that are confronting education, public education in the state of Vermont. And the reason I say that is because I believe that it's important to have an honest discussion about the issues the state is facing, and I don't think that's happening right now. The reasons for the escalating costs are much more complicated than simply governance, particularly governance at the local level. There's a lot more going on that the folks who are responsible for are not really divulging. And I think some of you that maybe work directly in schools will understand a little bit. I didn't really understand. Again, I've been doing this 40 years until we made the transition. And I really had to engage in a series of structural changes that made me understand just how complex education has become, what we've done to ourselves. I don't want to do PowerPoints anymore. So this is very short. I tried to capture a few key points. Again, the intent is to kind of lay out what happened in North Bennington, particularly maybe as it relates to Act 46, and hopefully let you ask questions. See, where have we been? Well, most of you know this. By the way, I'm not a demon, despite what the AOE says about me. In 2013, with the closing of North Bennington Grade School, we became a non-operating or tuitioning district, and by definition, parents have choice. And I'm always amazed at how many people do not understand that concept in the state of Vermont. It is unique to our state, and even folks in the AOE, I think, sometimes have a hard time getting their heads around what the concept really means to be a non-operating district. I mentioned this. So we were the 93rd district, and there are only 4 other districts that have the same non-operating structure as we do, which is a K-6 non-operating. We are operating 7 through 12, which means children who live in North Bennington are attending the Mount Anthony Union High School because the district is part of the Mount Anthony Unified Union. We were established as an approved independent school. We operate on a town academy model, and we opened our doors July 1st, 2013. I think it is safe to say that this was a sea change in education policy, certainly based on the reaction of the AOE and the state board and so on. They saw it as a sea change, that's for sure. Now, there's a couple things in there that you need to understand. There are differences between approved and recognized independent schools. I don't know how many of you are aware of that. We are approved, which means we can accept public tuition dollars. And the town academy model is an interesting concept. And again, I'm always fascinated at how many people talk about it, but particularly again at the AOE who are responsible for guiding us with education policy. They really don't understand this. I'll tell you what that means, I guess, as we go along here. Let's see, where have we been? Here we go. Now, the big question a lot of people ask is, why did we do this? It was complicated. I mentioned a little bit to you, when I started the interview for the job, clearly there was this issue of sustainability. That was a big one on people's minds. They wanted to be sure the school would survive. But what they started to realize as we began this investigation process, that is in order to sustain the school, it was complicated in the sense that the board in particular began to understand that local control was an illusion in the state of Vermont. They really didn't have as much control over their program as they thought they did. And what started to really bring it into focus was the process that we went through as a school district as it relates to Act 68. And like I've heard some folks say here, the community has always been supportive of North Bennington and its school. Overwhelming support for budgets, for the staff, for what we do there programmatically. But we've always been a high tax district. And I think in part there's a variety of reasons for that. I think some of it has to do with program. For a small school, we offer, as a public school, we offer an awful lot of things for kids. We have a strings program, have a counselor, full-time nurse. We had, when I got there, full-time music, art, PE, library. I mean, it was a very rich program for children. And the community wanted it that way. They were happy with that. They thought this was okay. But there was a constant pressure that they were under, and it relates to enrollment. The way Act 68 works, and I'm oversimplifying, but it's not too far off, that pretty much if your enrollment remains stagnant, the expectation under Act 68, the way the financial structure works, you're expected to keep your expenses stagnant. And what the board discovered is that that's not a reality. And this is where it gets into the local control. There were many items in their budget that they had no control over that would escalate each year. Some of them, are the things you'd expect, like utilities and fuel oil. Some of them were the unified contract that was negotiated at the supervisory union level. They had to accept. Some of them relate to special education, and they were shocked to find out that even at IEP meetings, the district has no representation at an IEP meeting, and they have no voice. It's the LEA that controls the outcome, which is your supervisory union. So special ed costs are something that they tax for but have no control over. That was a shock for them to find out. So we found this, we reached this critical mass back in, it would have been 2009, I believe it was, where we had reached the penalty in Act 68. And the board had always thought that to be responsible to the community, they would draw this line. They said, we can't ask our community to support a budget that puts them in the threshold. We can't do that. So they said to me, they said, Tom, you got to go back into this program and find a way to reduce the expenditures so that you're under that threshold. And so we went through the process that you would expect any school to do. I met with the staff, we talked to parents, and all the things that you would want to do. And eventually we determined that we would reduce special area programming, we would reduce a reading teacher, we would reduce some math support, and in the end we wound up cutting 5 FTEs total. And we reduced the budget pretty significantly, brought us under the threshold. But I remember the meeting afterwards when the budget had been adopted and eventually it passed, and the board said to me in March, after the town meeting, they said, Tom, we can't do this again. And I said to him, well, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, and I did the projection for him. I said, I can tell you right now that given the way that, the financial structure is in the state of Vermont, 5 years from now, you're gonna be doing this all over again. Because your costs will continue to escalate, even, particularly those you don't have control over. Your enrollment right now has a profile of remaining relatively stagnant, so as that gap grows, you're gonna be forced to reduce expenditures again. You're gonna be back at this table again, and you're gonna go further into your program, into those areas that you do have control over. Because you can't go at the ones you don't have, you can only do the ones you do. And of course, that's, your local staffing, it's your teachers, and your program. Those are the things you can control. So you can go in there, reduce your special areas, you can go in there and reduce, increase your class sizes, that's what you're gonna have to do. And my guess is, and I ran the projection, it was about 5 years out. When you, project increases of about 2% and so on, and we ran it out. It was about 4 or 5 years, and they said, well, Tom, what will happen over time is the school will eventually be reduced to a point where the community won't support the school because it won't resemble anything they want anyway. They'll want to close it. So what do? So we looked north to a couple of supervisory unions, and in particular we looked at Arlington, BVSU. Small supervisory union, thought, well, maybe, they're more in line with the way, the community thinks, a little smaller, maybe we'd have a little more voice, we'd be able to control expenses. But what they found in the investigation is that it probably isn't gonna save a significant amount of money to make the change worthwhile. But in that process, they visited Burr & Burton. And that was kind of a watershed event, because we came back from that, and they wanted to know a lot more about how Burr & Burton operated. They wanted to know more about town academies, they wanted to know more about independent schools. Is this something that, what is this all about? So that put me on the path of, putting together the information for it and say, well, here's what this means, this is what this is all about. And the board created an investigatory committee, they called it ISIS. And the task of this, well, it was Independent School Investigatory Study. That's what it's doing. And they put citizens on there, board members, staff members, I was on it. And the charge of the committee, I think there were 8 folks, was to look at whether or not, becoming an independent school would address the concerns they were having about the school. Sustainability, local control, financial pressures. Would becoming independent fix this? And what was the process involved? How do you do it? So for the next, 2 or 3 years, that's what we did. We really dug down into this, and eventually went to the community for a vote. And I think the history of this. This community passed the resolution to make North Bennington non-operating on the first vote, 3-1. At the same time, there were the group of us working on the application to the AOE for the school to become independent. The application was submitted to the state board. The regulations say the state board shall approve. The referendum that authorized closure of the school that the voters approved expired June 30th because the board wanted to be sure that before they took the action, the school was ready to open. The state board would not approve the application. Matter of fact, at the state board meeting in May, they didn't table it, they didn't do anything. They just ignored it. Basically violated the law, because the law says they shall approve. They didn't do it. And our June 30th approval expired, so we had to go back to the community again for another vote, and actually did that 2 more times. And each time the state board refused to approve the application, even though the community voted yes. Eventually, after the 3rd vote in January of 2013, the state board approved it with a split vote, approved the application, thereby giving the board, the public board, what they needed to go ahead and close the public school. So on June 30th, 2013 was the last day of operation of the public school. In effect, all staff members were laid off, all operations ceased, and on July 1st, we opened as an independent town academy. Well, there's a couple different answers to your question. Here's what the state board rules say. When the Agency of Education recommends an application for approval to the state board, it is supposed to be placed on the consent agenda because the agency has approved the application and recommended it for board approval. and they are to approve the application. That's what the state board rules say. Our application was recommended for approval by the agency.
And does the agency have, obviously, discretion whether or not to make that recommendation to the state board? And
They have since lost it, I believe. I think
So-
part of the change that's occurred at the state board, or at the state agency, the Agency of Education, is there is a lot more scrutiny given to these applications. The individuals involved in our approval, I think, received a lot of criticism for what they have done.
So that authority rests with the Agency of Education? and-
Ultimately, the answer is yes. When I met Pat Pallas Gray, who's the independent school liaison at the Agency of Education, to bring our renewal up, because we were only approved for a year, she wouldn't meet me in her office. She met me down in the lobby because she said my phones are being tapped and they're checking my email. She wouldn't talk to me up in her office. She talked to me down in the lobby. This was our mission, and again, this was very much a part of the conversation that we had throughout the conversations. There's been a lot of mischaracterization of what happened in North Bennington. There's been a lot of folks who want to use the term private. The Agency of Education continues to characterize what we did as privatization. It's a politicized term. There's an intent in that. We are not a private school. We are a town academy. We serve all the children from our sending town. This is not about exclusivity. It's about inclusion. We serve all our special ed kids. We serve kids with free and reduced lunch. We operate very much like a public school. We serve all children. Right. So, again, I want to be sure that, the misinformation doesn't, continue to spread out there. The community was very much invested in the idea that this model was going to work around inclusivity. Everybody was to be included.
Tom,
Yes.
could you give us the names of some other town academies?
Well, the four historic academies are the ones that you'll probably be most familiar with. Thetford is the oldest, Linden Institute, St. Johnsbury, and Burton.
Thank you.
Now, all of them are secondary schools, though. There are only two elementary town academies in the state of Vermont. The Village School and then the Mountain School at Winhall. Yeah.
And both of them are formally public.
Right, that's correct.
Went through this process to become independent.
We are actually governed by a self-perpetuating board of trustees, and we are considered by the state of Vermont to be a public benefit, not-for-profit corporation, licensed by the state of Vermont. We currently enroll 114 children, K through 6. We have 109 children from our sending town, and we have 5 kids that are paying tuition in the school right now, from area districts around Bennington. The school has now been approved by the Agency of Education through 2020. That was a painful process to get that, but we finally have. And we are also fully accredited by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, and that was a huge event for us. Actually, it was that accreditation that forced the Agency of Education to give us approval through 2020.
What happens in 2020?
Well, we would have to renew, but I suspect, given the current information that I'm seeing, that because of our accreditation through NEASC, it won't be a problem for us to be renewed. They have now agreed that they will accept NEASC accreditation as a sign of a quality program that they will support. So the accreditation was a huge issue for us, and it was just a tremendous amount of work to get that done. But again, I think the school needed to do it. Absent that accreditation, I suspect we would have had trouble getting approval from the agency again.
When you say that you have 5 or so kids coming who are tuitioning right now, is that from choice towns?
No.
Who are coming, those are actual
No.
families paying
These are
tuition
family
for
paying
them?
tuition.
Okay.
Well, parents can choose to leave. In other words, the parents who live in the North Bennington Graded School District have choice. So they can send their children to the Village School, or they can send them to Pine Cobble, or they can send them to Maple Street, or they can send them to Shasberry Elementary School. But if a parent lives in Shasberry and is not happy with the program at their elementary school, or if they live in Bennington, and I get these calls all the time, parents cannot understand it. They do not like the Bennington School District, they're not happy with their program, they want to be able to send them to the Village School, but they can't. The board will not
Without
pay their
paying
tuition.
tuition.
Correct.
And I assume
And
you
parents
have-
can't understand that.
you have
They
virtually-
just don't, again, because they don't work in education every day, it's intuitively illogical to them. They don't understand why, a mom and dad who live in North Bennington can do it, but a mom and dad who live in Bennington can't. It's just illogical to them. It makes no sense, but it's the law. We have, right now, the board is paying for 21 children who attend other schools, but one of those 21 attended the village school and chose to go somewhere else. The other 20 were families who were already sending their kids to Highland Hall, Pine Cobble, Maple Street, Shasberry, wherever, and paying the tuition. Now that we're a choice town, the board is paying that.
So did you have to transition to a choice town prior to being able to go through this process and transition to an
Well,
academy?
there are two issues that work concurrently. The public board is responsible for their governance structure. They are the ones that manage the issue of operating, non-operating with their community. And the state board, I think, has recently reaffirmed that ultimately the issue of choice rests with the voters. Communities hold that authority. And, you know, obviously, the public board in that district has that relationship with their community to work that process out. The issue of an independent school operating, being approved, being created, is entirely different from the public board. You'd have to have a group of folks in a community that wanted to do it. As a matter of fact, it's probably better if your public board stays somewhat distant from that, because that was an issue that, you know, was brought to the forefront with us, that the public board was actually manipulating the independent schools' creation. So, there, again, those two issues have to run parallel. Obviously, if you close a public school, you know, the question is, where do the kids go? So you'd want to have somebody looking at that issue of where they would go and what would the school look like, for sure. Where are we now? And I mentioned this to you. We serve 14 special needs students. The village schools, we are approved to provide service to all disability categories as recognized by the state of Vermont. There are 12 disability categories, and we're approved to serve all. So we have a special ed teacher, we have speech, OT, PT. We do all those things in our building every day.
And is that financially supported like it would any other school from the state or other agencies?
Interestingly enough, the relationship between the independent school and special education in many ways mirrors what happens in a public school. Because as I said at the beginning, the public board in an individual district has very little control, has virtually no control over special education. It rests with the supervisory union. The employees in your district are employees of the supervisory union, they're not your employees. Their salaries are determined, their schedules are determined by the supervisory union, and the IEPs and the program are determined by the supervisory union. You simply raise the money to pay for it.
So you participate in the supervisory union, even though you're an
We have to
independent
interact
school?
with the supervisory union for special education services. And what that means is the teachers work for us. They are employees of the village school, we contract and take care of speech and OT and PT, but the reimbursement comes from the supervisory union, and the IEPs are ultimately decided by the LEA, the supervisory union. They control the program, you know, what the child will
IEP,
receive.
could you define that?
Individual education plan
Okay.
of each student. Now, just some things that have happened since we've been independent. We've added a pre-K. So we now serve 3 and 4-year-olds. We currently have 22 children in our pre-K program. We added a fully functioning kitchen. We're also a school food authority. We participate in the free and reduced lunch program. We had to add a kitchen because our meals were prepared at the neighboring elementary school, and we were told that they would no longer be prepared there when we became independent. So in the midst of all this, we also had to build a kitchen. And then we had to set ourselves up as a food authority. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's a lot of fun. We have wraparound services for our families, including before and after care, academic support activities, as well as snacks. Let's see, we now do foreign language, Spanish, French, and Mandarin for all children, pre-K through 6. We have one-to-one computer, 100 iPads in the building. We have wonderful partnerships in our community, including the Vermont Arts Exchange. It's just nuts. We expanded our music offerings. We now offer African drumming, and we have a spring program that now serves 44 kids out of our 109.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How do you provide the language?
We do it through a partnership with Bennington College. Advanced language students come in and do language in our classes twice a week, starting in September right through June. It's an interesting story. The community wanted to do language as a public school for years. And I tried to find different ways to make it work. And each time I ran into a variety of roadblocks. One of them was the supervisory requirement that you had to have a unified curriculum, so if we were gonna do it in North Bennington, all the schools had to do it. That was an ongoing issue that we ran into. And then, of course, there were contract issues, salaries. It got to be incredibly complicated. I could never have done these things as a public school. It would not have happened. Just can't do it. Now, what about costs? Everybody wants to talk about costs. I'm gonna share with you a little, I said to my public board when we were a public school, there are basically two types of schools, you know, in the 40 years that I've been doing this. There are schools that have a relationship with their communities based on a constant conversation about cost. And I said, I'm gonna caution you so that you know where I'm coming from as your administrator. I probably won't stay very long and work for you if that's where you wanna be. And I said, the reason you're gonna find is that no one is ever gonna say thank you for paying their taxes. And if you want to build your relationship with your community around a conversation around taxes, what you're going to find is you're going to constantly be at war with your community, because it's never going to be enough. Never. No matter what you do, it will never be enough. There are some schools, though, that build a relationship around their community regarding service. It's what you do for children, the quality of service you provide. And I said it isn't just a conversation you have as a board. It has to be in every interaction with every employee, every parent, every child, every day. The focus is always on service to kids. Schools that do that operate much more successfully. It doesn't mean you ignore cost, it just means you change the conversation. So, the reason why I didn't put cost up there first is because it's just something I believe. Schools are about what we do for kids, right? And if you constantly are looking at cost, you're gonna, it's hard. So anyway, just so you know though, our approved tuition rate for FY16 is $13,391. Now, what I mean by approved tuition rate, our tuition is approved by the community. It's on the ballot in March. And this is the Town Academy model at work. If the community agrees to pay our tuition rate, we agree to take all the kids. That's basically how it works.
So you agree on a tuition rate as opposed to an overall budget?
That's what we do.
Right, as a town,
As a Town Academy, our interaction at the town meeting is a tuition rate is on the ballot,
Okay.
right? That tuition rate has gone up 1% over 3 years.
And that flows through the Act, whatever formula, right?
Right, well, the public board pays, their budget has changed dramatically. They really do not have a very complicated line budget now. They basically have a line budget that shows expenditures of tuition payments. And the largest one is obviously to us, because most of the kids attend our school.
Right. But I mean, ultimately, there's a per pupil cost, and that.
And they have, right.
Considering all of the people that go elsewhere, and then it goes through whatever the current rendition
Act
of the
68
formula.
formula, that's
Well,
correct.
Yeah.
And I'll show you a little bit of that later on here. Total operating expenses for the village school have decreased from 1.9 million, I'm rounding, I'll read all those numbers, to 1.8 million in 2015, which is about 7%. So all the things you saw us doing there, we're doing for about 7% less total expenditures than we were 3 years ago. And I'm incredibly proud of that. I'm incredibly proud of the work the staff has done, pretty proud of the work that our board has done. If you look at that, that's pretty amazing. Just pre-K alone. We started a pre-K program and we're spending less money. Now, I'll explain to you why. I mean, tuition payments made by the public district to the board have decreased 77,000 or 5% during our 3-year period. So unlike what David Sharp is saying, and other representatives from the Agency of Education, privatization has not made school taxes in North Bennington go up. It's a lie. And it bugs me that they're saying it. And if he was here, I'd look him in the face and tell him it's a lie. That's the line that matters. Taxpayers are spending $77,000 less to support this school than they were 3 years ago. So if taxes in North Bennington are going up, which they have, it's not because of us. And that's what they don't want to talk about. You know, because when we started this, you know, I said to the board, you have to understand there's going to be pushback. Because bureaucracies do not like change. They do not like outriders. And you're going to be an outrider. What I didn't anticipate, I've apologized to them more than once, I didn't anticipate the depth, the level, and the staying power of the anger. They're like adolescent children in adult bodies. They will not let go of this. And if you were to ask me why, I'm not sure. Whether they see it as a threat, I don't know. But the variations of assault on us do not stop.
And how do teacher salaries and benefits at the academy compare to what they were?
What we promised the community when we did this, because again, the community was very, very supportive of our teachers, is that we would bring salaries and benefits over. That this was not about hurting teachers, we were not about trying to somehow put this, the concern about cost in the back of our teachers. We were not about trying to eliminate health insurance benefits for them. So we brought benefits over. Now, I can tell you that some of those savings you see there have been, some of them have been in benefits. We came up with a really, I think, creative way to address health insurance that, again, I think for a public school with hundreds of employees probably would have been hard to do. And our health insurance costs have actually gone down. And we still offer a very similar health insurance plan for them that they had when they were public. So, I mean, again, there is some flexibility in how you handle staffing, how you handle benefits as an independent school that do give you some leverage that a public school does not have. The way I use staff, the way I'm able to move people in and out of areas and combine assignments, again, as a public school, I can't do that. And those end up being savings for us. So I put down here 2 areas of program where we operate at a loss. Special education, our costs are exceeding our expenses about $66,000 last year, and believe it or not, the school life program. And I want you to know those are the 2 prominent areas where the school operates outside of our control. Those are 2 areas that are regulated by the federal and state government.
Do you run annual deficits, and how do you fund that? It's,
Well, the reason
Overall.
we don't run a deficit in our regular program. So the regular program offsets those deficits in the lunch and the special ed, which is one of the commitments you make as a town academy. A true private school doesn't deal with those things. But because we serve all children, that's what we do. And it puts a tremendous amount of stress on us financially, there's no question about that. Because we don't have the track record that a Burton has or a St. Johnsbury. We don't have a $30 million endowment. Again, I have a skeptical view that consolidation, making entities larger, necessarily saves costs. Our SU doesn't seem to prove that. We're the most consolidated SU in the state of Vermont. And the costs, when we were a public district, we never saw costs being contained. So, tuition rate. I just did some graphs for you. This is what our tuition rate's done over 3 years. And this is what our operating expenses have done. And this is what our tuition payments to the public school district is. That's what they look like. Now, what about cost of public school district? And I want to be sure to put this in, because again, I want to be fair to you. I want to try to tell you the whole story. North Bennington Graded School District has a long-standing history of higher tax rates when compared to area schools in the area. You should know that. Since becoming a non-operating, expenditures as listed on their annual report have increased from $2,300,000, again, I'm just rounding because I want to know, to $2,400,000. That's projected for FY16. This represents an increase of about $157,000 or 7% over a 3-year period. The majority of those increases, did I do this? Okay. No, I didn't. The majority of those increases, that $157,000, are related to 2 areas: special education costs, the assessment they pay to the SU, and their increasing tuition rate, or tuition payments, I should say, they pay out to other schools.
all these, this data, is this assuming a stable enrollment for those 3 years? I mean.
Our enrollment?
Yeah, if you have enrollment up and down, then these numbers may not be valuable.
That's a great question. As the conversations around the state of Vermont have circulated around declining enrollment and school costs, our enrollment is very much related to our costs. One of the reasons why our costs have gone down is because our enrollment has actually dropped the last 3 years. Now, as our enrollment drops, we have to reduce costs. We're not like a public school. I just can't go out to the taxpayers and just ask them to pony up the money. I have so much money coming in. It's actually a very simple budget. X number of dollars coming in, based on the number of kids that we have in the seat, And we have to operate within that budget.
So your 1.9 to 1.8 may have been associated with reduction in students.
Oh, there's no question that's part of it, there's no doubt. It's also associated with savings in healthcare, reduction in administrative costs. We've reduced administrative costs over 3 years. But there's no doubt, some of those changes, the reasons why we scoured benefits and healthcare and administrative costs and other areas is because we had to. Less revenue coming in. And the model works. So what did we learn? Most of these are just, I think, opinions on my part. I think there's an enormous benefit to the independent school governance structure. As somebody who worked in public schools for 35 years, I've been amazed at how this changes your view of how schools operate. It has changed my perspective on schools forever. As such, it is damaging to children not to include this amount in discussions of the future education of Vermont. The question I think we have to ask ourselves is the view worth the climb, because it's not an easy climb. But to me, disappointing that this is not being given at least some seat at the table. And of course, the question is why. I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. I really don't believe escalating costs. And by the way, the research backs this up. What we saw served via consolidation. The reason for spiraling costs, despite declining enrollment, are complex, and it's a misrepresentation to claim that larger entities are going to create lower tax rates. There's a lot of things on the table right now that are driving up costs in the state of Vermont. I can tell you that, when they talk about, for example, student-teacher ratio, and they say, well, there's a 6 to 1 or whatever it is. There is no class in my building that has 6 kids in it. None. Our class sizes are all around 13, 14 kids. So the question is, where are those people? Most of them are connected to the over-regulation of education that I mentioned to you earlier. They're not in a classroom. That classroom teacher that's in there slaving away every day is not seeing that 5 to 1 ratio that the Age of Education keeps talking about. It's not there. It's not. I think independent governance structures and school choice do have some ability to control costs. I do think they do. I know for us, it's something that's on our minds all the time. Because we have to. There is no choice. When I look at our budget this year, I have to deal with the fact that the public district anticipated we have 112 kids. We opened the year with 107. We actually gained 2 kids. Everybody was like, yay, we're now at 109. I have 109 kids times $13,391 to operate with. That's the money I have, and I gotta make it work. Again, there's no smoke and mirrors. It's pretty straight math. There isn't all these things about equalized pupils, and what about, there's none of that. It is dollars in, dollars out. I gotta make it work. So, I do think there is some benefit to looking at the model in terms of how it might be able to improve program while controlling costs. Go to them and look at this in a broader way, rather than just trying to retrench and think, well, we're going to try to survive Act 46. I'm not sure that that's the best way to move forward.
Would you hold the same opinion if you were an operating district through that lens of 46 as an opportunity? In other words, not choice, but through a
I think it would vary from, it depends on the district. A lot of districts, a lot of them, it depends on what your demographics are, size, and your cost, your program, your relationship with your community. I think it would be a complicated answer, but I think it is risky for districts that are currently operating to assume that in a consolidated supervisory district, your school is going to survive. I think that's risky. And I think you want to be, again, try to be as forward-thinking as you can to try and anticipate what does that mean. If we maintain operation and we consolidate, what happens to that school? And is that what we want?
Your physical plant remained the same. You
That's
closed and you
correct.
reopened in the same.
The public school district owns the building,
Okay.
and we lease the building from them,
Okay.
right? And the way we would navigate through that process is we had the building appraised by 2 different folks, highly regarded, commercial appraisers, and they recommended a square footage rate for the lease, and that's what we put in the lease agreement. So we pay currently $78,000 per year to lease the building from the public school district. 3 separate lease payments we make to the school.
So Tom, just to clarify, when she said that your plant remained the same, I mean, you were the principal of the public school.
That's correct.
And then you became the headmaster of the
Right.
independent school.
I
And
was laid
you
off
brought
and
over
rehired.
pretty much all the same faculty, did you not?
All the staff, there were 2 that retired, but we brought over the entire staff. All of our educators who were employees of the supervisory union came over with us. So, again, kind of that leap of faith. The special education teacher was employed by the supervisory union, chose to stay employed with the supervisory union, so we had to hire our own special ed teacher. But yeah, the staff all came over. And again, as I said, we made the pledge to pay them, which we have done. And these past 2 years, we've given them 2% raises, which, cost of living. And again, it's interesting when we do this, I sit down with them as a group and we figure this out, because it's their, I've said to them, it's your business. It's like running a pizza shop. And again, the budget, I show it to them. There's no magic here, folks. What do you want to do? If you want a little bit more raise, just understand what that means. It's all there. That was the conversation we had about health insurance. That, again, and it went really, and I give them all the credit in the world, because they were looking for solutions, because now it's theirs. They understand that our ability to open in September depends on the interactions they have with each child every day. Every day. If that child chooses not to come back, it's devastating to us. So how they view what they do is markedly different than it was 4 years ago. So it's how I view what I do. I find myself around turning off lights. It's just what you do. I mean, you think so differently. Again, it's your business. It's yours. This is it.
So Tom, it must have been key to have the faculty on board with the decision to go independent. How did you get them on board? Or did it come from them?
There's no doubt this would be a different scenario if your staff was not as supportive. And that's one of the ways that we were different from Win Hall. Win Hall had done this back, I think, in '98 maybe. And my understanding is, and again, I didn't obviously experience it, but what I was told is that there was discontent in the community over the staff and tax rates, program, and this was, and then of course I think Act 60 had just taken effect, or Act 60, and so there were financial pressures, and that all kind of came to a head for them. But for us, it was different. This was not about the staff, and so again, to me, and it would just be how I would do things. I tried to be as upfront with them as I possibly could. I wanted to understand every aspect of this. What did it mean to them? And we visited Win Hall at least half a dozen times, and I made sure they were able to talk to teachers. And what does it mean to teach an independent school? And what they learned over there, what the folks said to them, is that most of them were public school teachers, and I think my staff would say the same thing. They recognized right away that they probably make less than their colleagues at MEMS. They said that right up front. But my staff asked the question that you would expect to ask: well, would you go back if a job opened at MEMS? Would you go? And all of them said without hesitation, no. And then the question was why? That's counterintuitive. But as they talk, what you find out is it's the beauty of independence. My staff doesn't deal with Common Core, state assessments. That's not the world they live in. It's an entirely different approach to their classrooms. It's much more child-centered because it's all about the kids for us. And so it gives them that, I think, freedom that they want to have, that they crave. And I should tell you a little bit, our calendar, if you look at our calendar, we don't have teacher conference days where kids get out at 11:30. And the reason we don't is because the staff immediately recognized that was hard for parents. And when we talk, I remember sitting there in the summer before we opened that first year, and it was fascinating to listen to them talk. What they figured out is that the reason why staff development days are scheduled at 11:30, 12 o'clock during the school day is because it was a contract issue. It's not because it's good for kids or good for parents. You're letting kids go, you're disrupting their education, and you're forcing parents to come in during the workday. It's a contract issue. And so they immediately said, we're not gonna do that. We'll do conferences in the evening. So we do. So there's no half-days in our schedule. Yes?
What was the process and the time frame of when the seed was first planted about becoming your own school?
Oh, my God.
And who helped you through this whole process?
It probably, from start to finish, was a 3-year process, I think. You know, we spent well over a year and a half researching, investigating, and then I think I mentioned earlier, we had 128, I think it was 128 town meetings about this, in different formats, different times, different places. So about a year and a half. And then there was the time that followed after the first vote, where we had to revote and restructure again. And then, of course, it was also parallel to that, the work that was going on with the application. So I think in the end, it was about 3 years, so 2010 to 2013, about 3 years it took us.
And when you say we were working on it, how many people, and obviously you were full-time employed already as the principal of the school, so how many man-hours, how
Oh, my
many people
God.
hours, or?
I honestly, it would scare me to think.
And these were all volunteers working on this, or were there people who were
Well, there was
brought on
those,
and paid?
the 8 folks that were on that committee that, you know, we met just about weekly
Mhm.
to review different aspects of how this was gonna work, the application. So, yeah, they put a lot of time in, to it, there's no question. You know, so, you know, weekly meetings over a period of 3 years, and then the town meetings we had on top of that.
Mhm.
It was a lot of time. Yeah. And I said to folks who come down and asked me, if you don't have a person on the inside that can manage this, it's really hard. I mean, the staff has to trust and believe in you, because ultimately it is a leap of faith. You know, when you say, yeah, we're gonna do the right thing by you, I mean, the reality is they were all laid off. They all got termination notices. That's like, wow, you know, it's not easy. You know, there was a board meeting where they were all, you know, they voted. You know, I mean, that's hard. So, you know, you have to have a culture in your school, you know, where people say, yeah, we trust you, we believe this is gonna work. So, yeah, we didn't use outside people. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit, if this is applicable at all, about, you talked about some of the financial flexibility that you gained.
Uh-huh.
What about in terms of managing personnel and staff and things like that? And I guess I'll just be blunt, in terms of teachers or other staff members that might not necessarily be fitting in with the new school, is how much control and how easy is it to, as a principal, get what you want for staffing, or do you still have to deal with the supervisory union and contracts and all that kind of stuff?
That's one of the parts of this that has been, I think, beneficial to the kids, and I think it has helped us save money. So we do have tremendous flexibility on how we utilize staff. You know, so for example, I had a really talented speech teacher who also was qualified in reading, so we were able to use her for a couple of sections of reading to help out with some kids that needed help with reading. You know, it allowed us to do that, you know, in ways that before would have been really, really hard for us. I mean, and all of our staff except one are certified. And again, that's something we're committed to. You know, it's not, you know, it's not something, again, some people say, well, when you're independent, you know, I believe that teachers should be qualified. Now, the one who's not, interestingly enough, and again, as a public school, I couldn't have done this, I have a great young guy who teaches PE for me. And he did not pass the, what do they call it, the state teacher exam. Can't think of it. But anyway, he missed it by a couple of points. You know, so he couldn't get certified. But I've known him for a long time. He's just a great young, the kids love him. He does a great job for us. You know, so he's not certified. I've been supporting him. I told him you need to go do your things, you know, so that you can get this done. But he's not. Now, if I was a public school, I couldn't have hired him, which would have been, I think, probably a loss for the kids. So, I mean, it does give us flexibility. The use of those those college kids to teach foreign language has been great for us.
Any other districts?
There have been some. I think what happens to them is that the decline becomes frightening to them, and I understand that. You know, again, to say that this has been easy would be misleading, because it has not been easy.
What would your recommendation be to us?
I will say the same thing I said to the board back home. I think you need to figure out what is it that you want to do, and try not to think about all the reasons you can't first. You know, think about what you want for your community, for your school, and then, you know, begin to develop a plan on how you make that happen. Because I think I said before, one of the benefits of Act 46, it may be that there's some opportunities in there to really do some creative structures with governance and the way schools are set up. And, you know, if you have if you've got a really great operating school and you want to, you know, maybe make it a little better, you know, there might be some opportunities for that. Or if you believe in choice, I just think Act 46 does give you some of those opportunities if you're willing to explore them. Let me see.
Other than the hard work of getting there, is there a downside?
I mean, there's no doubt, and again, I think I can speak for the staff. You know, I hope I'm right, God, I hope I'm right, because again, I think so much of these people. I don't think we'd ever go back. There's no doubt. I mean, I know that one of the, we just talked about the staff meeting, you know, their fears is gonna be, is there some way in Act 46 people are gonna lose choice? That's the, you know, that's their fear, you know, and what that would mean to the school, because they don't wanna go back. I mean, things that we've lost, I mean, there are some aspects of the school's operation that were easier when we were public. There's no doubt about that. I mean, like special education and the lunch program and some of the things that we now manage internally, it was far easier for us when it was done by the supervisor, and I didn't have to worry about those things. I used to send the free and reduced lunch application over to the central office, and they used to process it by hand. And special education just happened. And, you know, if we ran a deficit in special ed, I didn't worry about it. I mean, I guess there was less, you know, I guess anxiety, pressure, so that, I guess that's different, you know. There's been a lot of conversation that, you know, and I haven't heard mention this here today, but I don't know the answer. What does this mean to district's property? One of the questions that's come up is what happens to the school building? If the district owns it and the district is consolidated, you know, what happens to the ownership? You know, other assets the school may have, that trust, that gift money that I mentioned to you, you know, where does that go? You know, those are questions that I think communities are gonna have to navigate through as they look at consolidation. I don't know if Act 46 really addresses that I'm aware of anyway.